Hi, let's learn some UiPath. Today we will talk about how we can make UiPath write out some Fibonacci numbers. And for that I have been written the mathematically expression here for the Fibonacci numbers. And we'll see that whenever x is less than or equal to 2, the Fibonacci number will be 1, and otherwise it will be the sum of the two previous items. Well, it can be a little bit hard to understand, so let's write out the Fibonacci numbers here. And first Fibonacci number to 2. Essentially what x is just the number in the sequence. So this will be the first Fibonacci number, and we will write out the first 12 Fibonacci numbers today. So this will be the 7th Fibonacci number, and so on. You can, we will see that we can literally just, 12 is just a random chosen number. Well, we could make out 1000, but that will be a bit of a document we should write. So we'll stick to 12. And the functional value, that was 1 in the first two items here, when x is less than or equal to 2, and otherwise it's the sum of the two previous items. So the sum of the two previous items is just this, like this, and then we can just drag it down here, and we'll see that the 10th Fibonacci number, that's 55, and that's the sum of the two previous items, 21 plus 34. So with that being said, let's move to UiPath and create an actual sequence that will calculate it. Close it down here. We will drag in a sequence. I strongly recommend you to do it yourself while I'm doing this. Just pause the video, you'll learn a lot by that. So we'll drag in the sequence. We could call that Fibonacci number, like this. Then we will open it. And what should be in it? Well, we want, first of all, we want a loop. We want a loop that's going through the x's here. So basically the loop, the value will start at 1, then we will add 1 to it every round, and then we should end it at 12. Let's see how that is done. So we'll search for file, we'll drag in a while, and then we'll introduce the counter, the x value. So we'll create a variable, we could call that int x, or we could call it int counter, and it should be a integer. And let's think about what the default value should be. We'll see here that the default value should be 1 because x is 1 in the first place. So the default value here is 1. And then we will the scope, I'll just set to the Fibonacci number sequence scope. It doesn't matter, I think, but well, to be safe. So then we need to think of a condition that the while loop should run. Well, the condition should be that the while loop should run like from here to there. So that must be that the condition should be that the x should be less than or equal to 12. So we'll just write that in the condition. Int x is less than or equal to 12, like this. So now this while loop will just run. Now we need to think what to fill in it. First off, we'll just have the two Fibonacci numbers. We need to define two variables because we need the first Fibonacci number and the second Fibonacci. Like here, the first Fibonacci number will be 1 and the second will be 1. Or here, the first will be 21 and the next will be 13. So we will introduce two more variables. We will call them int fib number 1. That's our latest Fibonacci number. Again, a string. Like this, and then we will introduce a third variable called int fib number 2. Those are integers, of course, like this, and the default value again is 1 because we'll see here that there should be 1 here. So what we can do now is just going through this loop 12 times and to write it out. We'll write in, take a message box. You could take a write line, you could write to a text document, but we will just write out these Fibonacci numbers after they were in. So we need to be able to write to a message box, to a string, we need to have a Fibonacci string. So we'll call that int, we'll call that str, and we'll call that fib, and that's a string. And it doesn't hold a value yet. So what value should it take here? We will add a value to it, but first off we will need to define what the string fib should take. So we will drag in the sign, we will drag it in here, and we could have the assigned, so that's the Fibonacci string. So every time this while loop runs, we will add a value to it. And what should that be? That should be the previous Fibonacci number, the previous string of Fibonacci numbers plus the new Fibonacci number. So that will be the int fib number 1. And now we should remember that we have an integer here, so we need to convert it to a string. So that will be dot. Then we'll write to string like this. And then we want a space because there's a space after the actual numbers like this. And then we will drag the message box out of the while loop. So we'll just show the Fibonacci string like in the final round. Then again, we need to add 1 to the x's, otherwise this loop will just go on forever because int x will just be 1 all the time. And we want 1 to be added to the x like every time. So we'll drag in a sign in this while loop. And we will say that the int x here we should add 1 to this every round. How do you do that? Well, we just say int x plus 1 like this. Now we're ready to write to this message box. That will be our string fib. So before we run it, let's talk a little bit about what it's doing. Well, it will run this 12 times and it will add to the Fibonacci string. It will add the Fibonacci number 1. And then a space, and then it will add 1 to the counter, so it will run 12 times, and it will write it. So it will just write 12 1. But let's just see it. We'll click run, and we'll see that here there's 12 ones. Now that's a start, because now we fixed these two guys, but we need to fix the other 10 Fibonacci numbers. So that's when we are up here, when x is greater than 2. So how can we solve that? Well, we could drag in an if. That's quite easy. So in our while loop, we'll drag in an if here. And what this if should be, the condition of the if should be that if int x is less than or equal to 2, then something should happen here, or else something else, like if it's over 2, and it will not become greater than 12 because that's what we defined up here. So we just saw that it was 1 whenever x is less than or equal to 2, so that's over here then, and then we should do nothing. So it's the else thing we need to figure out, and the else thing, that's the case up here. The uppercase where x is the sum of the 2 previous items. Well, we can solve that quite easy. How's that? Well, we'll drag in a sign. So what the new int fib number is, that's just the sum of the 2 previous items. So that's the int fib number 1 plus int fib number 2. So now we'll change the value of the int fib number 1 to the sum of the other 2. However, we need to use the value of int fib number here before it gets added with int fib number 2, because we need to store it into int fib number 2 for the next round. So how do we do that? Well, we'll just introduce a help variable. We could call as control K, we could call as int, call as help or store maybe, and we'll change it to an integer, just write it in here. We can store it, and we will store the int fib number 1, so we got it before it gets changed. So the int fib number 1, we'll store that here, and then we will, after this addition has taken place, we will assign the value to int fib number 2, And the value to that is the value we stored up here, the int fib number 1, before it gets changed. Oh, I know it's a little bit complicated, but try it out yourself, maybe with some different numbers, and you'll see that it's actually true. So this is the int store. And now we actually created the Fibonacci loop. It will write out the first 12 Fibonacci number. Let's see how it works, and if it works, and if it's not working, let's see how we can solve it. Well, now we see here that 1, 2, 3, 4, we've written out the first 12 Fibonacci numbers, quite easy. And if we want to change it, let's say that we want the first 20 Fibonacci numbers, then we'll just change the while condition up here. And we'll see that now we've written out the first 20. We could write out the first 1,000. Well, it'll take a while, so I won't necessarily recommend that, but you can try. So what we've done here is we created a while loop and a sequence that writes out all the Fibonacci numbers. You could write it to a text or whatever you want to store it in a data table or something. So I will leave the code below the video here, as well as the Excel sheet here, so you can try it out yourself. That's it for today. Bye bye.